Welcome to the bizval podcast. At bizval, we are passionate about empowering entrepreneurs the world over to understand and unlock the value in their business. We work with advisors and entrepreneurs to demystify the value creation process when building a business. At bizval, we know how tough it is to grow and run a business, which is exactly why we've made valuations simple to understand, accurate, and affordable. Our unique blend of tech and touch ensures that you always receive the best service, authentic human engagement, and data-led insights to ensure that you build a business that provides you with freedom and choice. In the bizval podcast, we showcase stories of real entrepreneurs and advisors, sharing lessons and inspiration from their journeys to make your journey just that little bit easier. My guest today is a remarkable woman. She started Bravura in 1999 at the tender age of, maybe I shouldn't say because you could work out her age, but at the tender age of 29. And she used her first ever corporate bonus as the founding capital. Now, 26 years on, Bravura is one of the leading independent investment banks in Southern Africa, with offices across 3 countries, a wall full of Best Independent Advisor awards. She's a qualified lawyer, an LSE alumni, and a Beacon of Africa role model winner. Soria Hay, welcome to the show.
Hi, Graham. Thank you so much, and it's a pleasure to be here.
Fantastic. Well, Soria, as you know, our podcasts are very conversational, and we always like to start at the beginning. So we're talking, our audience is, from South Africa to London to New York. So for those of you who don't know, Soria started a journey in a small town called Empangeni, which is in KwaZulu-Natal in South Africa. And that journey started there, but it took you through to Pretoria Law School, where you funded your studies through a variety of jobs. I mean, starting as a teller at Pick n Pay, which is a retailer, and working at a vet and various things along the way. But looking back, those early experiences, the hard work, the entrepreneurship, talk us a little bit about that background and how that shaped, who you are today, Soria.
Graham, so I was born in Impangeni, but we lived in Matuba, which didn't have a hospital. And my dad was a church minister, still is actually a church minister. From Matuba, we went literally where the Spirit led him, as he always said. So from there, went to Mettle, which is just outside of Maritzburg, then to Pretoria, then grew up in Rustenburg in my high school years, and then studied at Pretoria, as you say. And I think what that really assisted with was adaptability, changing and moving many times in my life, meeting new people, being not scared of new situations. So yes, that is in short how I grew up.
Yeah, I mean, we see it with a lot of people having almost that, as you say, that adaptability, that resilience, and also kind of just taking what life throws at you, and taking those opportunities. I want to talk a little bit, so you didn't kind of start where you are now. Talk a little bit about those early days, as a teller in Pick n Pay. I mean, we often talk to owners, and those that kind of started at a grassroots level often have a real appreciation for, every job in the sort of value chain. What was that like?
Yeah, so I studied LLB. That was 5 years, so many years to be funded. My dad signed surety for me, so I could get debt. But I was very scared of debt in those days for 5 years of studies. So I worked during my university year. I actually worked at the commercial department as a junior demi. And then every holiday I worked. So from the Bata Shoes, for those people who still can remember them, to United Building Society, to Pick n Pay on the till. And again, I think what he did was, number one, give me appreciation for hard work and how hard people really work to make a living. But number two, just seeing different businesses, different circumstances, and most especially that money does not fall from the tree. It doesn't grow on trees. You need to work hard and really aim for where you want to get to.
Absolutely. I think nowadays people think, all you have to do is become a YouTube star and, the money falls off the trees. But I think it was a different era that, I guess we grew up in, and you had to really work hard to, to get anywhere. Okay, so you've done all of that, and you didn't go straight into corporate finance. So you qualified as a lawyer. You did your
Qualified as a
articles at
lawyer,
as Van der Merwe and Du Toit, if I remember correctly. But how did you
Panama,
go
very
from
good.
that? What drew you from law, ending up at Mettle in the late 90s doing corporate finance? And how did you discover that this was what you were really passionate about?
So what frustrated me from law was it felt to me as if it was very reactive. Contracts, you
Mm,
wrote up the deals that other people have already agreed. Litigation, you cleaned up the fights that they have already entered into thereafter, and that was really a grudge purchase. Um,
yeah.
and I wanted to be where the decisions were made and where I felt the action happened. And I must say, at the
Mm,
time, I wasn't sure what corporate finance is, but I knew that even if I achieved the most senior position in the law firm that I was in, I wasn't going to be happy. So I
mm,
applied for a corporate finance position at Mettle, which was then a bunch of entrepreneurs 2 years out of what was then Anderson. And they
yeah.
started this business, and I was fortunate enough for them to give me a job.
Sometimes it's a huge privilege to be part of a startup business because you're probably doing a little bit of everything. You're learning on the fly. You obviously had that legal background in terms of process and discipline, but it must have been, I guess, wild in those in those early days, right? Probably doing everything from drafting deals through to carrying the tea. I'm guessing.
Yeah, and I think that was one of the things that really allowed me to grow very fast. Metal was quite
Yeah.
an unstructured, very entrepreneurial environment. So you really could do anything literally that you liked, which is unheard of for somebody with, a year or two of experience. But that
Yeah.
allowed me to really feel the sky was the limit. And I felt like a fish in the water from day one. I loved the deals, loved the clients, loved the chase of the opportunities, and really loved the commercial part of it, which was very
Hmm.
different to where I came from.
100%. Okay, so you've been there a couple of years now, and in 1999 you got your first, let's call it corporate bonus, which I'm not going to say how much that was, but I guess in those days it was a reasonable amount of money. Today it might buy you a few a few burgers and chips. But jokes aside, you made the bold decision to basically start your own thing and invest in building what is now known as Bravura. So at the time, what was your sort of thought process? You've moved out of law, you've moved into corporate finance, and now at 29 years old, you decide to go and do this on your own. Let's talk us through that decision, and what was the conversation that was going on in your head at the time, Surya?
So, Graham, I always wondered if I did something for myself or had my own business, what would I do? And I
Mm,
came to the conclusion that number one, I must do what I'm good at. And number two, I must do what I really love. And fortunately, corporate
mm,
finance was both things, both those things for me. I loved the corporate finance itself. And I was fortunate enough at the time to have two clients who said, listen, if you go on your own, you can still do our work. They were quite big names then. And one of those
yeah.
clients even sublet my first office for me for 6,000 Rand a month. I remember I thought it was actually quite expensive. But yeah, I think it was a huge pull factor. And I
Mm,
always say to people, if you know where your first cash will come from and who your first
mm.
client will be, well, then you have a business plan. Then you can start a business.
Yeah, I mean, that's so true. I think also, a lot of people want to start a business and they don't have that, so you'd already de-risked to an extent. And I think a lot of people in corporate as well, they think they have the safety of corporate, but the reality is you're 3 months away from, a retrenchment if you're working in a big corporate. So if you've got runway for 3 months or 6 months, an idea and a client and some safety net, it's no more risky in some ways than sticking it out in a corporate. So you made this decision now. I wonder before we go into that, I mean, where did the name Bravura come from when you started? I mean, was that what's the idea behind that?
So I love music and I played lots of musical instruments when I grew up, the piano, the church organ, the guitar. I sang in many
Yeah.
different choirs. I, until today, sing in the Joburg Symphony Choir. Um, and I wanted a name that symbolizes what I really strived for every day, which was doing my absolute best, having huge technical excellence in the execution of what I do, and also having a bit of chutzpah, that daring. And when I used the agency and they came up with a name, and they said you would use the word bravura to describe an area that was just beautifully sung, or
Mm,
a great daring, a piece of music that has been played with great daring and great brilliance. And I loved it. I thought
mm,
this is exactly what I want to achieve. And I must say, until today, for me, Bravura is such a fitting name for our organization. We're now 60 people. But I think if you ask anybody in Bravura, they will tell you our first value that we strive for is to achieve technical excellence.
mm. That's excellence and brilliance, so it's aspirational. And I guess when you're dealing with clients and the kind of business you do, you want to be excellent, right? No, nobody wants their advisor to be mediocre. You want the best of the best, and it starts with the name, and it starts at the top in terms of that mission that you set.
It's also important to know in the market who your opposition is. And if your
Mm,
opposition are big brand names with business cards and, being very well known, then the only
yeah.
people or reason people will hire you or will use you is because you bring something else. And I think we
Mm,
always say we bring that technical excellence and the personal service. And for those
yeah.
things, people would hire Bravura for work, which many of the banks would love to do.
No, absolutely. You have to find your niche, what makes you different, right? You can't just tick the box. And I think, it's, as you say, it starts with a name, and it starts with something which really makes you stand out amongst the crowd. And yeah, I'm going to go back to those early days now. So for our international listeners, they might not appreciate that. And even people today, this might seem like a bit of a foreign concept, but late 90s, Pretoria, okay, in the legal and finance worlds, you've spoken about the Meneer culture in the legal fraternity at the time. Partners were addressed as Meneer, and for those non-Afrikaans speaking, Meneer is Mister. So it's a very sort of strong, older, let's call it paternalistic culture, if you want to call it that. Now you walk into the room as a corporate finance and investment banking house, which was male dominated. You come in as a young female, bringing something different, bravura, excellence. What is it actually like to navigate it at the time? Was it something you consciously thought about, or was it just something that you kind of took in your stride? How did you sort of come up against that?
Graham, it's very interesting. So for me, I found that culture almost like shackles. But
Mm,
Johannesburg is very different. I think in
mm,
Joburg, most of the people are very open. It's not hierarchical. It's flat structures. If you have interesting ideas to discuss with people, they're always happy to listen to you. I think here and there, you will have some, especially seasoned businessmen, who would think that, you're the secretary who have just brought the coffee. But they see the mistake very quickly and apologize, and we all laugh and we move on. For me, that is one of the wonderful things about, I'm going to say Johannesburg specifically, but I do want to say South Africa too. Um,
mm,
it's not old school. People are willing to
mm,
see people with ideas and who's entrepreneurial and to want to add value. So for me, Joburg suited me perfectly. I
mm,
understand I have never worked in Cape Town, but I understand that Cape Town is still also a little bit more, old school, I would say. As I experienced the legal fraternity and Pretoria in the old days. But yeah, I just loved the chase in Johannesburg. And I think the other thing in Johannesburg is if you don't think of yourself as a woman in a specific scenario, I think very quickly other people also do not see you as one. Unfortunately,
mm,
in many meetings, I look around the table and we will be 10 people in a meeting, and there, would be one or two, maybe maximum three women. Um,
mm,
and I think it is a little bit of the industry, but I think there's also a part where women think you can't have it all. You can't have a stimulating, very interesting, very challenging and dynamic career and a healthy family life, be a good mother and so forth. And I don't believe that. I believe you can have it all. You must just be very structured and very disciplined.
Yeah, and I think, as I say, it's easy to look back now, 25 years later or so, but I think you're right. I think Joburg had a very progressive culture, and at the end of the day, it's about excellence. And I think you've proven that it is possible to have it all. So let's talk a little about that. So you've been 26 years in the chair, so to speak. Now Bravura is multi-country. You've got anchor shareholders that include some of the biggest names in South Africa and investment community. You've been named the best independent advisor multiple years in a row. Tell us about what you actually love about corporate finance. What's the thing that's kept you, in the seat for almost 3 decades? And it makes us feel old, but probably feels like 3 years as opposed to 3 decades. So what's it that keeps you getting up every day?
I think it is the fact that it's so interesting and so multidisciplinary. Every transaction that you get involved with, the client is different, the requirements for the transaction and what the client needs is different, the industry is different, the circumstances are different. Corporate finance in itself is so multidisciplinary in terms of its numbers, accounting, valuations, tax, legal, exchange control, different regulatory elements. So from that perspective, it really allows you to be very widely, I think, trained and informed. That is in addition to how markets play into it, how what happens worldwide plays into what we are doing here in Southern and Sub-Saharan Africa. So it is just that continuous change, that continuous stimulation that keeps me going. Love my work.
Okay, so it's that variety, and also I guess some of the people that you meet and the problems that you're solving, right? I mean, every single deal and every single client is different. So um, I think that brings some added stimulation. But we talk about that, and I want to take the other side of that is that sort of staying power, because a lot of our listeners, the world of corporate finance or investment banking it's famously brutal. Long hours, deal cycles. I mean, I'm sure you've had a deal close at 1 minute to midnight on Christmas Eve, for argument's sake. And a lot of talented people in this industry burn out by the time they 35, 40. How have you stayed on top of your game for so long, Soria?
I always say to myself and to my team, there is no such thing as work-life balance, because what is that? It doesn't exist. What does that mean? Is it 50-50, 60-40? I mean, what is the balance that people refer to? And I say to my team and to myself, you have to get to your priorities. So when it is somebody's birthday, when your child is playing in a concert, if your mum is sick, as an example, a Father's Day event, etc. So for me, it is not about, the first thing is, it's not about this hairy, woolly concept of work-life balance. It is being disciplined enough to get to your priorities. The second thing that I say is corporate finance is a marathon, it's not a race. If you don't pace yourself, if you're not very disciplined and structured and ensure that you get to your priorities, you will burn out. It's not 100-meter race, and therefore I say to the people who work at Bravura, you have to exercise, you have to do all of those things that one can so easily say, next year, when things are better, I will get to it, because then your health, your emotional life, and your relationships will suffer because of it. And I say to the guys, that if you get a heart attack, that is our problem as well. If you get divorced, that is my problem too. So you may just as well tackle your life and do it properly and do it in a structured way. And then what hangs with that is we really, really encourage people to take leave. Number one, when you're in corporate finance, when your clients work, you must work. And by the way, December and end April are probably the only, over December, probably for 2 to 3 weeks, and then end April for a week. That's sort of the whole of South Africa is on leave. But I encourage them to take leave in the middle, and I tell them, guys, rather work early in the morning and again, late in the afternoon, but take your leave and see interesting places, reward yourself, travel, do amazing things with your loved ones, than to sit behind your desk and think you're going to do it next year or in 5 years when you have time, because that time will never come.
Yeah, I think there's so much wisdom in that, Soria. I mean, just a few things I want to draw down on that. And one is, that perspective of, another deal will come. At the time, that deal is important and you give it your all. But at the end of the day, that's one deal in a marathon. I mean, you're doing it 26 years later, right? I think the other thing is, and I think maybe it's a little bit of a sort of misguided notion that you have to work hard so that you can retire at 55 or 60. And what's super interesting is a lot of the most successful people in the world don't do that. Look at the world's billionaires. They're working into their 70s, 80s. So there's a perspective that work is actually a blessing. So find something that you're passionate about, that you can triangulate with, and build it into your life. Don't use it as an excuse to miss out on all the things along the way. If you want to travel overseas, spend the money. Don't wait till you're 65 and in a wheelchair and you can't get up the gangway on the ship, so to speak. So I think there's a lot of truth and a lot of wisdom in that. And I suppose the fact that you found something that you're passionate about and good at helps. It helps give that perspective. But clearly, you haven't ignored your hobbies, your singing, your family, all those things. You've kept those front and center, which I think is also great advice and great wisdom. It's not an either or. It's a question of prioritizing the right things at the right time. And I love that perspective that you bring to it. I want to
Yeah, no,
talk a
that's
little bit.
exactly right. And in our industry, it's actually frowned upon. And that is where I say to my team members, guys, we do this differently. You can deliver the output. I don't care about the input. I don't care where you do it from, when you do it, etc. But yeah, it is very important to stay human and remember what is important in the middle of all of this.
Absolutely. It's about relationships at the end of the day, right? So
Exactly.
let's move on to a little bit about Bravura. You've probably, forgotten about more deals than most people can can even start to imagine. But you've advised on hundreds of transactions over the last, quarter of a century across mergers and acquisitions, capital raising, listings, empowerment structures. I want to ask you a little bit about that experience. What are what is maybe one deal or a transaction that you're really proud of, where you've created some lasting value, you look back on and, it's a story you're going to tell your grandkids one day, versus, maybe a transaction that you were part of that didn't go the way you wanted, and what did you learn from that? So maybe you can just kind of draw out, those two, I guess, opposite sides of the scale.
So let me start with the one that I'm incredibly proud of, and so proud of the team that's involved with that. So myself and Ian Matthews, my co-shareholder here in Bravura, together, of course, with ARC and Dr. Christo Wiese, we seed funded Solar Saver, which was a renewable energy business in 2016. And that was at the time. Now everybody signs PPAs and everybody buys the electricity. But that was when, from a legislative perspective, you couldn't sell electricity. So they structured it as a lease and so forth. To make a very long story short, we also assisted them and they raised capital over the years, $40 million from Pimbani Remgrow Fund later, some from RMB, Corvest, etc. But then by the end of last year, we implemented a transaction for them where Pimbani Remgrow Fund exited, and we raised a further 750 million or so growth capital. So the total transaction was 1.8, and that allowed the founders to take some money off the table. It allowed the Pimbani Remgrow Structure Fund to completely exit, and it gave them new growth capital with Inspired Evolution, Sweet Fund, and FMO, the big international investors who came in on the back of that. And for me, that was such a nice transaction because we backed Tim Frankish, who was a Bravura alumni at the time when he started the business. And we really walked a 10-year road with them to get to this point, and we still invested in them. So that is a lovely success story, and absolutely great for those talented guys who achieved that. I would say one of my biggest learnings came very early in my career. It came within the first year after I started Bravura, and I acted for the IQ Business Group, and they were going to merge with Spicer. I don't know whether you recall, but they were a listed IT business at the time. And I remember the business, those were the days when the business days were still on the polls, the front pages, and it said the R1 billion merger. Everybody was so excited. I mean, that was 25 years ago, a big amount.
Yeah.
And the due diligence failed. And I sat in that meeting with the executives where we actually shared all of the problems that we found with both teams. And the share price crashed before it was announced in the market. So I was really a babe in the woods, but I reported this to the FSB because clearly there was insider trading there. And I had to later testify at the FSB, which was quite scary. But the learnings out of that was, the corporate finance discipline of having your minutes 100% up to date, ready. You need to know who was in meetings. You need to have paper trails of everything that has happened. And the outcome of that was that the CEO of Spicer got a fine from the FSB. And of course, the Spicer business completely disappeared and failed. That was actually a very sad outcome, but lots of learning out of that one.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes it's the tough stories that kind of, as you say, they fire the clay, so to speak, and you don't forget them easily. So you take that with you into every new deal, I guess. I want to kind of just expand a little bit from that. So you've spoken about sort of, I guess, a commercial success in terms of a deal, and let's call it a commercial non-success, if you want to call it that. But something that I always want to I'm passionate about is sort of the values that underpin Bravura. You spoke a little bit earlier about, how it's important for you to kind of have a true north and a sort of steady value systems. And that's kind of guided you, through life, I guess, and also through business. But can you maybe think of a story where you've had to actually, really live the Bravura values, where you've had to stand up, and how did that impact on a deal, successful or not? I mean, I guess the last story was an example of that, where you had to do that. But anything else that stands out for you, Soria?
It is so interesting. If you work in corporate finance, you often have huge success fees dependent on successful outcomes of these transactions. And the successful outcome is not necessarily in the interest of the client. So again, very recently, literally in the last 6 months, we acted for one of the big listed groups. They had a franchise business that we had a mandate to sell for them. And we received an offer that they were prepared to accept. And we worked with the party throughout the due diligence and, the term sheet, etc., which our client was also prepared to accept. But we started to become very worried because we knew how important the franchisees were to this business. They would never want to let them down. And we didn't feel that the values and the chemistry and the understanding of the incoming partners would really serve the business well. So in the end, and this wasn't even me, it was one of my team members, Craig Shaw, he sat with the client and he said, you know what? Don't do it. Don't proceed. And in that moment where you tell and the client accepted it, the client was almost relieved to get this advice because they knew they should walk. But again, they were also looking for an outcome where they could dispose. And I think in that moment, and in the end, it's in that authenticity, in the client knowing that they will always, what they get from you or what they see is what they get, and you will walk the extra mile with them. Doesn't matter how difficult it is, doesn't matter whether it hurts ourselves financially or not, but we will tell them what we really believe. And I think, being a smaller business, it is also easier because we don't serve big interests. In the end, we are completely independent. We are just here to serve the client's interest. And the second thing that I say to the team always here is we must know we're worth it. So where clients don't rate it, or they don't want to pay for it, or they want to pay in a way that they treat you as a commodity service, we won't do that work. In the end, we need to work our hardest, be our best self, have the technical excellence, and know we're worth it.
I mean, there's so much that resonates with, I guess, the way we do business at bizval. Obviously, we do valuations, and we're independent by design, so to speak, right? And sometimes you have to stick to those principles. We have a saying in our business that we'll always tell the client what they need to hear, not what they always want to hear. Everybody wants a dollar sign instead of a rand sign in front of the exit number, or they want an extra zero. But also, as you say, sometimes it's having that courage to kind of say, you should walk away from the deal. And that's hard, right? Especially when you're sitting on a nice success fee potentially. And then I think that other thing around, just around how you actually navigate that authenticity. At the end of the day, people, they don't want a cheerleader, they want a professional in their corner, and somebody who's going to relay both the pros and the cons of doing things. And I think that experience that you've built up over the last 25 years, that's almost implicit in the way you go about doing business. If I say so, so I want to just kind of, before we wrap up, and we always do what we call a rapid fire section. Before that, Soria, I just want to leave, as a final thought, you started Bravura 26 years ago with 180,000 Rand and a vision. Now you're sitting here as one of the top, investment banks on the continent. Very humble. You say you deal with small clients, but some of your deals are pretty big. But you've also made a point of bringing other women through the door behind you. But on this platform today, what are the one or two lessons that you would want every listener to take away from this conversation? What are those?
I think the first one is you're only as good as the team that you work with. So hire the smartest people that you can find, smarter than you, and that makes your business materially stronger. The second one is love what you do and have fun doing it. If we don't do that, then in any event, there won't be a good outcome for the client, and definitely not for us. And the last one is it is all about the client. You have to go the extra mile. You have to deliver that bespoke outcome that works for the client. So in the end, we are only as good as the last transaction that we have delivered to a client.
You can never rest in your laurels. Your reputation precedes you, but you can't rely on it, right?
Yeah. No. If you do one bad transaction, that will really cast a shadow over the 10 good ones you implemented before then. I believe
as I say, trust takes a lifetime to build, but it can be lost in a nanosecond, so to speak. So Ryan, I'm going to go into what we call our rapid fire, and this is really just 5 or 6 quick questions. It's to allow our listeners just to get to know you a little bit more, the person behind the business. So let's start with the first one. Just quick questions, but one book that you wish every entrepreneur could read.
It's a book on negotiation. Never split the difference. The name says it all.
I haven't read it. It's on my shelf. It was an FBI analyst, I think, or interrogator who wrote it. So what is your takeout from that?
Well, the thing is, it's so easy for people to say, let's meet each other in the middle. But for example, if you manage a business for a 30% margin, and a client is sticky about, the minimum fee or the fee that you want to put on a transaction, and you say, okay, fine, I'll meet you in the middle. Then your margin all of a sudden is 15%. And then you cannot pay the salaries that you need to pay to keep talented people. You cannot pay the bonuses that you need to pay to keep talented people, which is a vicious circle, because very soon your business won't be excellent and you won't have great many clients who are happy.
So both parties aren't happy. So I guess what you're saying is you need to be confident enough to say, this is what I want. And I guess it goes to relationships. I mean, what's the book about marriage? His needs, her needs. It's about stating what you want and not compromising, but finding a way to create a win-win situation for both parties rather than a half-baked compromise, which suits nobody in the long term.
Correct. And Graham, explain where you come from, eh? So when I explain to clients the margin that I protect and why I need to protect it and why I need to price as I price, they understand it.
Yeah, exactly. It's creating the context.
Exactly.
What's the single best piece of advice that you've been given?
Do your absolute best and be unattached to the outcome.
Excellence and hard work. and what will be.
Yeah.
If you could, jump into, a Back to the Future time machine. Okay, if you could have coffee with a 29-year-old Soria who's about to use her 180K bonus to start a business, what would you tell her?
Really just two things. Try hard and know your worth.
So you do nothing differently, basically. You'd go for it. Looking at South Africa, and South Africa is a country, as you say, which is incredibly resilient, and it's been through many different phases and seasons. But if we look forward over the next 10 years, I mean, we've been looking into the past. What is the one sector that you would back the hardest over the next 10 years? It's a hard question, but love to get your view on that.
So must be technology. I think the way that technology allows everything that touch the consumer, everything that touch payments, everything that touch even what we do as a business, both you and I, and how that is currently devolving and moving forward. I'm incredibly excited about what is to come.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's not just engineers in Silicon Valley who can do that. I mean, we've got great skills in this country, and we need to back ourselves, I guess. And there's some fabulous businesses that are doing that already, but we need to do more in that space.
Exactly.
Last question is, and I look at the industry itself. If you could change one thing about the South African corporate finance industry tomorrow, what would that be?
I would love to make it more accessible for women generally, not just here at Bravura. And I want mothers and fathers and families to be able to have a very exciting career in this industry and have the healthy families and the good values. And together with that, to use technology to work smarter and get more skilled.
Absolutely. You don't have to sit in 2 hours of traffic to get to a Sandton head office anymore. You can do a lot of the stuff you can do from the comfort of a home office, right?
Exactly.
Soria, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on the show. I think it's been, I think we've only just scratched on the surface, so we might have to get you back for another conversation at some point. But I really just appreciate your honesty and your time. If anybody wants to get hold of you or connect with you, what's the easiest way to do that?
The Bravura website, so www.bravura.net, or on LinkedIn. You can look for me and I always respond.
Fantastic. Well, to our listeners, I hope you've enjoyed this episode. Please reach out to Soria. I hope you enjoyed her insights. And thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this podcast, please share it with somebody who needs to hear it. And if you've never had a proper valuation done before, head over to www.bizvalglobal.com. Until next time, keep building, and we'll see you soon. Thanks, Soria.
Thanks very much, Graham. It was a pleasure.